I want to shoot for more likes and exposure. And I mean, that's not inherently a bad thing, of course, right? More exposure is great, but who are you getting in front of, and are you relevant to them?
This is the Yield Coach Show, episode 41. Hey everybody, this is your coach Ian Brown. A few announcements. Yield Coach Capital has opened its doors to investors looking to multiply their money while working with yours truly and our varsity investment team. We recently closed our 170-acre Gainesville, Florida industrial tract, and our limited partner investors are on pace to make 2.5 times or more on their money. That opportunity is gone, but don't miss the next one. Be sure to join our investor list and never miss a deal again. You can join our investor list by the portal, which is in the show notes of this podcast. It's in our Instagram bio link, and you can also do it at yield-coach.com. If you join our investor list, we will get you the free gift, 107 questions to ask a deal sponsor, and a discount to our Employee to Entrepreneur video course, which is packed full of information and case studies to kickstart your investment success. Now is your time to take the field. I'm your host, Ian Brown. Every episode, we bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, thought leaders, and inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so you can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate your own success. Very excited to have Mr. Yakov Smart here with us today. He is the host of the Raising Capital Show. He helps investors raise private money for real estate transactions. He's also the leader of the Investor Attraction Academy. Welcome to the show, Yakov.
Hey, thank you for having me, Ian. Really great to be here.
I kept it brief on the intro. I know we can dive in deeper, but it's fairly niche, teaching people to raise money. Obviously, at some point you were raising money or still raising money for real estate. How did you come into this?
Well, it's a very long story. I'll give people the short version of it, actually. So I started off in the lead generation space, I'd say 2014, 2015 in the online space. Even started dabbling it when I was a student in college. And that kind of led to this evolution of me teaching people how to use LinkedIn for lead generation. And I wrote the book on that. This was, I think, 2016, 2017. And working with a number of different business owners, basically showing them how to find clients and generate leads on LinkedIn. And I was doing fairly well. I had a lot of different seminars, trainings, things that I was doing. And then 2020 hit, and a lot of those trainings kind of went away because they were in person. And serendipitously enough, at that time, I started having real estate entrepreneurs. We'd worked with a couple, but I started seeing a consistent stream of people reaching out to me saying, you know what, we're really looking for investors right now, right? We know we need to go beyond friends and family. Do you think this online stuff that you teach, especially on LinkedIn, do you think it can actually work in this space? And at the time, I wasn't really too familiar with the lingo of what a syndication was and, 506B, 506C, any of that stuff. And I said, well, if we're talking about booking meetings and getting interest from high net worth individuals, it should be a very similar process. And it was, right? So I went down this rabbit hole, went down this path of really learning the space, understanding what are investors really looking for and what's going to be attractive to them in marketing. And from there, that kind of became our sole focus, where now we work with people, like you mentioned earlier, on raising private money, going out there, building relationships with high net worth individuals so they can fund more of their deals.
Very cool. We have the episode hasn't aired yet. This guy, Jim Pfeiffer, came on, and he has an online community. I think it's called Left Field Investors. The only reason I bring that up is he started with like a physical meetup, small, dozen guys and gals that would have like dinner or drinks and talk about investing and kind of share some deals in their local market. And then COVID came. And when you said that, it reminded me, and he was like, I wonder if we can just do this virtually since we can't meet. And then I think they have like 1,300 people in their online community, or pretty much organically. And I was like, oh, I made me think of that when you said that, how you wonder, how well can you replicate the face-to-face online? And I think it's safe to say you can do it pretty well, and you can do it at scale. I'll pause there for a second. But, if there is a question in all that, I'd say, was COVID kind of a silver lining for digital marketing, digital networking, and some of these platforms?
Yeah, I'd say you definitely can. There's a lot more scale. You can leverage one-to-many automation, which I'm really big on. You can leverage that as well. What people need to understand, this is where I think sometimes there's frustration because if someone says, well, I'm an in-person belly-to-belly guy, the online stuff hasn't worked for me. Well, what have you done online? Right? If you're posting content sporadically, that's not really trying, in my opinion, right? So it's taking the same principles of human behavior, why we know, like, and trust people, and translating them to the online platform. The biggest difference is you have shorter attention spans initially, right? So a lot of people kind of vomit their message on people, and it's an issue, right? In person, you could get away with that because we're all polite people, right? No one's going to run off in the mid sentence. Online, you don't really have that room for error. So it's just a different channel. But I think the other thing that's really working in everyone's favor right now is because of 2020 and because of where we're at in the world, people are very comfortable doing business online, right? There, that aversion that maybe was there 10 years ago, I think for the most part, that's gone. I mean, you even have for investing, there's platforms out there like Yield Street where people literally will log on, look at deals, and invest without talking to anyone, without really having that face-to-face kind of communication. So anyone who's a little more old school, I would invite you to think of it as something very similar, but just more scale that you can do from anywhere, right? So you're not tied down to having to go to those networking events and do all that schmoozing, which, there's still a time and a place for that. But the reason why I think people gravitate towards it is because of that leverage piece.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And leverage, and there's an extreme cost savings. Even if you were going to host a simple meetup in your own neighborhood, presumably you're going to pick up a pizza tab or, a drink or two. I mean, it would be hard to host a meetup for less than at least a few $100s every time. And you can make a pretty big splash online, essentially for free, really just your time, maybe some software subscriptions. So, LinkedIn, I must confess. So we have one. We're trying to get better. We're trying to take a lot of our like social content, put it on LinkedIn. For like 5 years, I just left it alone. I think I like lost my login and never went back. I feel like it's made quite a resurgence, and I'm sure I'm like super like a dinosaur even saying this, but can you speak to kind of like the evolution of LinkedIn, kind of where it was, where it is now, and why you like it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think when I started marketing there, it was, first of all, it looked completely different. It was a lot less user friendly. I think the interface was kind of clanky. I remember the first time I ever made a course on it. It's funny because I spent like 10 hours recording myself doing stuff on LinkedIn. And like that very next week, they completely changed the design and the interface. I was like, man.
How dare they?
It's funny timing. So
Yeah.
it's gone through a couple of different iterations. I think people are spending a lot more time there than they used to. People are there not necessarily just for career networking though, because now there's a lot of business professionals, entrepreneurs, investors. People are there to learn, to grow, to consume content, and to build relationships, right? And I think also a lot of people are using it poorly in the sense that first of all they're doing nothing, right? Or they're doing very little just because for whatever reason maybe they don't think they have time in the day, they don't really know what to do, so they do nothing. And then there's people who I think are abusing it in some sense, where they're just going out and sending these long-winded pitch messages to people. And there's a lot of that happening too, even in the capital raising space. I think, there's some people out there that think, okay, I think this person has money, I'm just going to go pitch him a deal cold. Well, first of all, that's usually illegal, right? So you don't want to do that. But second of all, it's just not as effective, right? It's just like, in human relationships, if you were to meet someone at a conference, if you wouldn't say, hi, my name is Ian, and I've got this deal just out of the gate, that would show poor social intelligence, right? So it's the same thing online. So I think where it's at right now, content is doing very well in terms of, LinkedIn actually shows you how many impressions you're getting on content from your personal page, right? I think a lot of people are just starting to prioritize it a little bit more as a content sharing platform. Like everything else, you've got to have some consistency there, right? So where I think it's going, I think it's a great place to build a personal brand. And I think, in the future, everyone to some extent will need a personal brand. I think we're already seeing that right now. So I think there's a lot of, personally speaking, I'm not big on Instagram, right? you talk about forgetting passwords. Like I've got an account somewhere I haven't logged in since I got a new phone, right? And I don't care to, right? It's more of a social thing. With LinkedIn, it's a different context, different audience, and specifically for business purposes. I think the question of whether or not we enjoy using social media personally in this case is kind of irrelevant, right? Because they look at it as a tool for building relationships and ultimately raising and making money.
Yeah. And I feel like, I wasn't using social media at all a few years ago. I think I had a Facebook way back in whenever Facebook went from EDU to being wide open. It was right when I was graduating college. And then I let that kind of go. And then everyone was getting on Instagram however many years ago. And I remember like looking over my friends' shoulders while they used it. And I was like, what the hell is that? And which is kind of, now I must say now I got my arms around Instagram and I use it some. We use it for Yield Coach. I throw a little bit of personal stuff on there, but then like TikTok, like I've been watching pretty much over people's shoulders again, TikTok. And we actually do have a TikTok account. We just move our content from Instagram over to TikTok, and it doesn't always transfer perfectly. I find it like it's overstimulating. I'm kind of ADD. You can't put that much in my eyeballs. Like I know it's all an attention grab, but I'm like, oh my God, I just need to like go take a long, quiet walk in the woods. It's just too stimulating. It's like too much visual, too many hooks and grabs. So I do feel like with the LinkedIn audience, and you probably know this, I feel like you might have more people actually on a desktop, maybe statistically more, they're still on a phone just because of the world we're in today. But versus like Instagram, there's not many people using like Facebook and Instagram on like an actual desktop computer. LinkedIn, I remember when I was using it more, like having it up on a second screen, kind of following certain people, looking at content, actually gaining like more educational stuff. And I think you're right about personal branding. I've had some people on the show. Who was it? We had Ryan Alford with the Radcast, and he was talking about how each of his kids, he's reserved the domains, I think, as well as the social domains for their names, and they're young, they don't need them yet, but he knows it's just going to be like part of your resume, part of your personhood to have some of these domains and digital spaces and personal brands built out way earlier. Because some people now don't have it, don't think about it. And I'm not saying they're gonna be left in the dust, but I think as you try to go out and raise capital, because that's what it's kind of the theme of this show. I mean, this episode, at least with you, people don't know you yet. So if you haven't created any content, how are they going to get comfortable with you enough to transfer money into your investment? I think that's where, some of this conversation might trend, but like the know, like, trust. Well, step one, no. So if you're not in anyone's eyeballs or earballs, how are they going to know about you? So maybe I'll pause there for a second, but that know, like, trust digital space, you've carved out an expertise. You help you help people how to, to do this. I'll pause and let you kind of run with that notion a little bit, but getting people to know you online and building that personal brand.
Yeah. So, you think of it as digital real estate, right? So the show is about real estate. We'll talk about real estate deals, digital real estate. That's what we're talking about here. Having your own domain, it's real estate. Having a social media profile, it's real estate. Having an email list, huge marketing asset, right? Having those relationships one to many. So that trust factor, I actually think the mistake that a lot of people make is they go down the content creation rabbit hole without making themselves relevant to a specific person, right? So I want to unpack that a little bit, because they think, okay, I want to shoot for more likes and exposure. And that's not inherently a bad thing, of course, right? More exposure is great, but who are you getting in front of, and are you relevant to them, right? So if you want to go out and raise more capital and you're relevant to 15-year-old kids on TikTok who like your dance video, like, cool, you had a video go viral. I don't think any of them are accredited investors. I could be wrong, but maybe a couple of them. Yeah. But it's one of those things. So I think sometimes people get caught up in these like vanity metrics. How many likes did I get? How many comments? How many views? And like, to that, I say, who cares? Like, who's looking, right? Let's look at more relevant metrics. Are you translating social into an email list? Are you building out your investor sphere? How many people are you actually talking to offline? How many people are you getting on the phone with, right? How many people are you creating that experience for? Because once you have someone's attention, that's when know, like, and trust really starts. But until you have their attention, nothing else matters, right? If they watch a cool video, you don't really have their attention, right? It's about making it relevant to people. So I think the know, like, and trust, what's great about content, however, is the know, like, and trust can be done one to many. You create it one time, like we're creating this podcast episode one time. People are going to listen to it over the weeks, months, and years. Many people are going to listen to it. It could be thousands, tens of, however many people are going to listen to this. But we have this conversation once, and it adds to both of us, right? So that's why it's one to many. It's really, really powerful. And the other thing too is, I think the more specific someone can be, if they're going to go out and create content or direct messaging or anything, the more specific someone can be, the more effective it's going to be. So it's okay to be for some and not for others, right? You know, people have heard about the concept of niching, maybe in terms of what deals they're looking for, what their expertise is. But I want to challenge people online to niche what you have to share, right? So if you want to build a brand that's seen as high end, where you want to attract high net worth individuals who can invest alongside you, really speak to those people and don't be afraid to ignore the rest. That's really, really key.
I think that's very good advice. I think the vanity metric is something people need to be careful of. So we got into kind of building this brand a couple of years ago, and we didn't really know exactly where to start. You know, I'm a real estate attorney, broker, and appraiser in the state of Florida. I have some clients that know me. I have friends that know me. I have people that invest with me. But but the world at large doesn't know who I am. Who's Ian Brown? What's a yield coach? So we started the social media, and shortly thereafter started the podcast. And one thing, two things you said though, like the vanity metrics, we were paying for some like boost campaigns, trying to get, non-organic growth to socials and stuff. And there's almost no point in doing that, in my opinion. Maybe I would say maybe in the beginning, but I'm not so sure, because you might get thousands of followers on different platforms, but even if they're not, let's just assume they're not bots or just like paid for following, they're not engaged. They were promoted or pushed in front of somebody else's screen, and they're not really what you want. And so it probably took us like 4, 5, 6 months to realize, okay, to your point, niche down. And we're still in the process of niching down. Because you don't want to be all things to all people. You don't want to just be like, oh, Mr. Investor, come to me with all of your questions for investment. Well, that's way too broad. So, what's unique about me or us? Okay, I got the law school loans. They're huge. Okay, what did you do about becoming an investor? Was huge, with a huge student debt obligation. Even like, you're in the state of Florida, should you be talking to like the young lawyers divisions within the state of Florida that have high debt and want to invest in real estate? You know what I mean? Like, really getting down to an avatar where it's like, and you think that's not many people, but you'll know if the niche is too small. And I think until you get there, you're not. And then there's there's a funny expression I heard recently, and he goes, this kind of online coach guy goes, a lot of people call me with their concepts and they talk me through their avatar, and I have to wind up and niche slap them. And I was like, and of course, so I was like, just, so sometimes I just try to like wind up and, let's say niche slap myself, and make sure that our avatar is actually focused down enough to where it's relevant. Because otherwise you might be one to many, which is what this platform, we're podcasting right now. This is kind of a one to many, but I mean, you want to be relevant to those that are listening. You don't have to be one to all. So
yeah, it's a key thing, to kind of jump on what you said there. So that lawyer's example is a great example, right? Attorneys, state of Florida, you've got some specific subsets there. So within niches, there's other niches, right? It's like this thing where, lawyers can be one niche, lawyers in the state of Florida, family law in the state of Florida, you have real estate litigators this age, right? So these are all specific niches. So people say, well, that's too specific, niche is too small. How do you know it's too small, right? Because I would challenge that. I would say, let's say that, I call it total universe, that pond, right, is, say it's 10,000 people. Let's just say, hypothetically, it's 10,000 people, give or take. If out of those 10,000 people, you become the go-to guy and you're like omnipresent in front of those 10,000, you're going to get referrals from them to other people who might be different, who can invest alongside you. And if out of those 10,000, let's say just just 100 of them invest 50,000 with you every year. Okay, now you're raising some money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's when you're that focused, that number is not that hard to hit, right? Versus if you go out and say, well, there's this many millions of accredited investors. Okay, cool. But some of they're different types of people. Why are they going to resonate with you more than the other person, right? So it comes down to who's the better marketer. But when you're niching, like in your case, you're an attorney, no one can knock that off if they're not an attorney. They're not going to lie and say that they're an attorney. So it's an instant commonality. You've had the experience of having the student debt and also investing. Again, no one can knock that off, right? So you separate yourself, you become that market of one, and people really feel understood. And that know, like, and trust, I think, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think niching makes any type of marketing at least 5 times easier. So you get
Mm-hmm.
5 times the results from the same effort. So why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And like we're talking about, Instagram and TikTok and some of these other platforms earlier, it's so noisy and you cannot really distinguish who has like credibility. Even if they're trying to, like, let's say just Instagram to like a niche, it's still more difficult because there's this whole attention span issue. Whereas like we said, if you can get your avatar listening to your podcast for whatever it is, 30, 45, 60 plus minutes at a time, I mean, that is like precious attention in today's day and age. And I don't think people are going to hang in for an hour long podcast unless you are the avatar, unless you are niche down. My wife is she's a public defender. So she's a state employee attorney. And I think she's coming up on 9 years, and the stuff she listens to is nothing like I listen to. So I get in her car and it's like serial and criminal and, my favorite murder. And it's all this stuff. I'm like, you listen to this all day, and you get into mine, and it's going to be Audible, personal development, or real estate and business books. Or it's going to be a entrepreneurial podcast of some kind. I have a few, we all have a few favorites. But the point is, like, I'm the avatar of what I'm listening to. And it's unlikely, even if I thought, I'm going to ride up to the lake house. We go to a family lake house in South Carolina. It takes like all day to get there. We usually listen to podcasts or audiobooks when the kids aren't screaming. Sometimes we'll listen to her stuff and I might even find it interesting. And I'm like, there's no chance. There's zero chance that when I get in my Silverado on Monday to drive off to work, that I'm tuning into what she was listening to. I'm not it. I'm not the avatar. And, but to your point, just to bring it back to one to many within a niche, within an avatar for raising capital for real estate. We just closed a 506c. It was my first, I've done a lot of personal investing, but it was my first syndication closed about a month ago. We raised $1 million in private equity through a 506c. We did a C so we could advertise. And there were some lessons learned. We probably could have done a B. Everybody, for the most part, we had a couple that we had literally 2 that didn't already know me or my partner. And we probably, actually, I know we could have done the deal without them. What I'm getting at is, like, I thought we needed to be able to just, throw a bottle rocket on this message, send it out there and pull a bunch of accredited investors in. Okay, you raised $1 million. How many people was that? Well, it was my partner and I and six LPs. It's like not that many people. It's like not that many wire transfers. So people are like, oh, I need to raise $1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million. It might not be that many people. So I think, to your point, niching down, being really tightly aligned with the people you're talking to and building trust matters. You don't need 1,000 people. I mean, you and I both probably, we don't need to necessarily rattle off names. We both know people in the industry that can raise 5, 10, 20 million pretty fast with an investor list under 1,000.
100%.
So I mean, right? So I mean, it's like you don't need okay, I got 20,000 followers on Instagram or 100,000 or 1 million. Probably doesn't matter. So it's like, but if you have 1,000 people listening to your podcast every week or two or something like that, that might really matter. They might actually be interested in participating. So I'll pause there for a second, kind of talk about your thoughts on, digital marketing, getting your avatar, and eventually getting them all the way over the line, because it's a big move. People will tell you, hey, Brownie boy, fist bump, I'm in on your next deal. You put the next deal in front of them. crickets. You know what I mean? It's just, people have enthusiasm, and then you give them a real deal and some wire instructions, and you get alligator arms. But I'll pause there.
Yeah, what's the saying? Everyone wants accountability until they're held accountable, right?
I love that. Yeah.
It's that saying, right? Yeah, so followers don't necessarily translate to investors at all. There's no direct, and we have to look at it like levels of attention. So if someone invests 5 seconds to watch your cat video on Instagram, that's nothing, right? That's very commoditized attention. Someone's investing an hour to listen to your podcast every week. Okay, you've got attention, you've got relationship. It's one of many. Someone's on your email list. They're opening a couple of emails from you every week. Okay, that's investment of attention. Someone decides to book a call with you. It's an investment of attention, right? Someone says, yeah, I'm in, keep me in the loop, I'm ready for the next deal, investment of attention. Someone wires you money, investment of attention, right? So it's like we have to look at it as different, steps up a ladder that we're taking people, right? So that requires patience. That also requires, kind of a long-term outlook as well. It's an interesting story you shared about the 506c, right? Because a lot of people, I think, make the mistake. They're like, okay, we have this just great deal. Like this thing's a no-brainer. It's like, you'd be an idiot not to invest in it if you look at the numbers and you know what you're doing. So they start putting this deal out there. But if people aren't educated as to, how are you reducing their risk? Are they bought into you? It's not about the deal. It's about the relationship, right? It's about, them being bought into you and having that affinity, and also having the belief in themselves to put their money on the line, right? And that sometimes investing's a muscle, right? Sometimes people start small. So this idea that, and I think, this is an interesting person to bring up too. Like, let's look at someone like Grant Cardone. I'm sure everyone on the show kind of, knows that guy. I don't know how much he's raised. He's raised probably 100 million plus at this point, maybe more. I know he's done a lot, and he's got I think 9 or 10 figure businesses. But anyway, whether you like him, hate him, indifferent, he talks a lot about going bigger, 10xing, right? Doing mass volume. The thing that I think people don't understand is he's got a lot of assets already going. He's got 20 plus years of momentum. He's got a huge team. He's investing probably at least $1 million a month in marketing and overhead, probably more than that, right? So you can try to model that, but there's no way, if you're a solopreneur, if you have a small team, that you're going to be able to move as quickly. There's no way. And I think you can potentially scale up to that if that's what you want to do. But if you're good with raising 5 to 10 million a year, and kind of being in that space first, it's like doing it one step at a time, right? The very first step might be, okay, how do I get people onto an email list? How do I get X amount of calls per week? So I'm growing the database, right? What's the nurture sequence look like, right? What are the different channels? And I think you have to start lean, no matter how much. And if you've got more resources, maybe not as lean, but even that, like, you start with the niche and then you branch out, right? I think he actually did that. I think like his original claim to fame was sales trading, if I recall. So that niche was salespeople, right? Pretty broad niche, but I think I think he started actually with car salespeople, right? So even a guy like that who talks about 10xing, oh, you got to go big. Yeah, but look at what he did, right? And I think sometimes if he's giving advice from where he's at on niching, he's not going to have the right context because he's not starting to do that in 2023, right? So I think there's no reason not to niche, right? And I think it's also important to look at things scientifically, look at data, right? And have a real process and a system in place, right? Because sure, you can get a quick win. Maybe you post something, someone reaches out, you're like, oh man, I'm a badass online. But what's the systematic consistency? And can you get this running without you being too involved in the day-to-day? I think that's also a target to shoot for right out of the gate.
I think it's interesting, anytime somebody brings up, Grant Cardone on the show, which has happened before, it can be divisive for some people. But I think what matters for our, discussion, we talked about personal branding a few minutes ago, and he's done such a good, whether you like him or not, he's done such a good job of just kind of owning his persona, whether it's real or not, but it's still the persona, his public persona. And he is consistent with it, and it is in your face, and you know what he's up to. And he's relentless on interviews, and he's relentless in his media. And you're right. And I think what he's done, he's become such a powerful persona that I've noticed an interesting phenomenon. People, especially like celebrities almost, I mean, not even almost, like to a level of at least like online celebrity, maybe not celebrity like we think of like in movies, but he'll get people that are really well known, at least online or in our kind of our circles, that'll come in and participate with him, in my opinion, at terms that are actually not all that great. I mean, I'm on some of his email lists for some different offerings. I've never seen one on the numbers that really got me too excited. I either know that I could do somebody else's syndication and hit better multiples and better IRRs, or do my own. But he's got such a big personal brand. It's like people want to be able to say, "Oh, I'm in Cardone's deal, that 10x building in like Biscayne down in Miami. I'm in Cardone this, Cardone that." So it's almost like there's like a brag to it, a prestige to it, where to me that's a pretty interesting phenomenon, that somebody could build a brand large enough to where somebody would take a lower return. And I'm not saying they're horrible, but I'm saying like relative to what a lot of syndications offer, a fairly conservative return, in my opinion, to be in that ecosystem, to have done to be in a Cardone deal. I think he's the only guy I know doing it at that level. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's human nature, right? You want to be associated with the celebrity, the big dog, right? And I think if you invest in a Cardone deal, you're at the barbecue with your friends on Sunday, you're like, oh, that Grant Cardone guy is everywhere. I'm invested with him, right? That's bragging rights. And whether that makes any logical sense or not is irrelevant, because that's human nature. So there's a lesson there, right? It's not necessarily about having the best offering. It's about having the affinity, right? Because your offering could have much better terms in every way, shape, or form, but someone goes with him because, oh man, I've seen this guy online everywhere, and oh yeah, it's that persona, and I resonate with that. So it just goes to show, I think investing isn't as logical as people say it is, right? I think a lot of investing is emotional, right? Just like everything. There's marketing. You gotta understand the emotion. You gotta understand people's experience. How are they feeling? Right? When they see your content or get a message from you or get an email from you, right? Are you creating that, emotional kind of pull? Do they see you? And this is another thing, and I'll say, and this is it's going to sound a little bit controversial, but I'll say it anyway because I think people need to hear it. I think if you go, let's say you go to a networking event, right? And there's a bunch of investors there, accredited investors, high net worth individuals, and you're out raising money and you're networking with those guys. I think initially you have a little bit of a disadvantage because you're in the room and they find out what you do, and they may see you as someone who's trying to push a deal and sell stuff. So like no one wants to be a salesman, right? For lack of a better word, versus if they see your content online, oh shoot, this guy's famous. Oh, I watched his webinar. Oh, I listened to his podcast. Now you meet them at the same event. They see you in a certain regard. Same thing for my stuff, right? I think that positioning piece is so key because it gives people a peace of mind. And also everyone wants to do business with the expert, the person who's known in that space, not the person who just wants to go out there and make a sale, right? And I think, a lot of high net worth individuals, they feel targeted sometimes, right? And by targeted, I don't mean necessarily in a positive way, but they feel like if they're a doctor, lawyer, people think they have money, so everyone wants them to invest in the next big thing. So I think there's tremendous power in having people jump through hoops, in having people, go through an actual intake process before getting any offerings from you, and having people be vetted and feel like they're a part of something, and they've had to invest some time and attention to have and I call it the honor and the privilege of investing alongside you, versus, oh, you'll take anyone who has money because you need to close this deal. It's a much stronger position to be in having people already be pre-sold, bought in.
Now, in your platform, you lead this Investor Attraction Academy, and you've talked about, attraction and people kind of having an affinity and for who they're working with. And it's very important. We talked about Grant. He's nailing it. The people that are investing, they're certainly not anti-grant. To the contrary, they're willing to probably take slightly lower returns to be in a grant deal. So what are, we talked about LinkedIn. I've seen some people have success with webinars, using Eventbrite, email nurture campaigns. Obviously, we're on a podcast right now. You run the academy. You don't have to give away all your secret sauce, but as much as you want to, feel free. But like, what do you like to educate people to do when they're out there trying to attract investors, in this academy that you run?
Well, I think it's really important to not spread yourself too thin, right? I think you don't need to be posting 3 times a day. You don't need to be on every social media. It's a terrible piece of advice, especially for people who are starting out. So depends what level the person's at, right? If you're just starting out in this online space, most people we work with, they're either starting out with finding investors beyond friends and family, or they're just starting out in capital raising in general, or sometimes, they've already raised 5 to 10 million and they know they need to scale beyond that current network, right? So that answer is going to vary a little bit, but I think at the very least, you need traffic and you need a funnel. Okay. And I'll unpack what that means if people don't know. So we'll actually start with the funnel, right? So the funnel is, and it's a term that gets tossed around a lot online, but I want to just kind of simplify it. It's a front door, right? It's a gate that people can go through, right? So that they become email subscribers, so they come into your world in an intentional way, right? Just because if someone's following you on social, if that social account gets lost tomorrow, you've lost that relationship. So we've got to extract people, at least get them on an email list, right? So you control the asset, right? So the funnel is, that's where automation comes in. That's where getting someone bought in comes in. That's where, building that know, like, and trust factor at scale comes in, and really creating that investor club effect. So with that, my take on it is investor attraction webinars, right? I believe if someone watches, and our customers will test this, if someone watches a 15 to 25-minute presentation, not you pitching a deal, but a little bit more about your background, your investment thesis, some of your track record, and they watch that before they have a call with you, a lot of those initial questions get answered. A lot of those initial objections can be overcome when you have the right framework. So by the time they're on the phone with you, and you're also not talking to them to pitch an opportunity for that intro call, you have someone who can largely be pre-sold, right? So it's almost like we're elongating the process on the surface, but we're really not. We're actually accelerating the sales cycle, right? Versus you just cold pitch someone a deal on social, very low chance that they're even going to show any interest, right? So that's the funnel piece. That's the follow-up emails, that's the email marketing, list segmentation. That's having having that page, having a way to collect information, all those kind of things. So that's the front door, that's the gate, right? So your world, your community lives behind that gate, and for someone to have the honor and the privilege of investing alongside you, they have to go through that gate. Okay. Now the traffic piece. And this is where a lot of people mess this up. They spend all their time and energy focusing on the perfect funnel. They're like, oh, should I be giving away this thing, or how many emails do I need to have in the sequence? And there's definitely some rules of thumb, but if you have this is the way to look at it. If you have a 9 out of 10 funnel, meaning, like, objectively speaking, your funnel is just like crushing it. It's a really good funnel, and there's a lot of criteria there. And if you're a 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 on traffic, you're kind of screwed, because no one's coming into the funnel, right? And if they are coming in, they're not the right people. So that's an issue, right? So when we talk about traffic, I recommend people have at least one inbound source and at least one outbound source. Now, why is that, right? Well, you want to be diversified. You don't want to have one lead source. That's opening yourself up to risk. Inbound channel, it could be your guest on other people's podcasts. It could be you're posting consistently and generating leads that way, right? Could be that you've got an advertising campaign, or media buys, all these different kind of things. Outbound is very much this kind of old school approach, but the new school take on it. It's through direct messages, right? Using direct messages to go out there, start relationships, and book meetings with people, right? Cool thing is, doesn't have to be manual, doesn't have to be grunt work. You can automate a lot of that stuff, right? But it's getting someone's initial attention through a direct message, because that gets a higher open rate than an email, right? You start building the relationship that they can look at your profile, and they book an intro call, and then you're getting someone through the gate that way, right? So I recommend at a very minimum have at least one inbound, one outbound channel, optimize those, and then keep stacking, right? Go deeper with those. And where I think someone like Grant is very effective, or his team, they're at such scale. They're on every social media. They've got so many channels for leads. They've got their own media. He's a guest on other stuff. He's spending money on advertising, right? So that's a very scaled version, but we've got to start where we're at. We've got to have at least a funnel that's solid, right? So you can have somewhere for people to go once they're past the gate, and you've got to get a way to get them to your front door, and that's the traffic piece. So at least one inbound, one outbound.
So the direct messaging plus meeting side, I think that can be very effective. I think one thing that, and we're not doing much of that right now, at least at my platform, but I know the power of it. And I think once you've done it, you've got a really solid contact or lead, however you want to qualify them. Your podcast posts, et cetera, blogs, media appearances, they're great for like the attention side. But I mean, how many times have we listened to a killer podcast with a dynamic guest? You love it for a full 60 minutes. You're ready to run through walls at the end of the episode, and you can't actually you can't remember like the call to action or who the guest was. You're like, oh, I need to go back and find it in the show notes or something. I've pulled my car over before, just before my phone rolls on to like the next show or the next thing, to make sure I've like followed or liked or like done something or screenshotted to where I can remember who and what I just recalled, because we're so inundated as humans today with media. So what I'm saying is that is awesome for, like, I think kind of like that top of funnel, just people just pouring in and getting a lot of attention. The direct messaging and like scheduled meetings, that's obviously a lot more like blocking and tackling time. It's going to be a big time commitment. You probably want to have some staff, unless you're willing to do it on your own, and you can time block and do it on your own. But I understand the podcast, the posting, the media. What do you do on, advising and coaching and consulting side to kind of help people manage this direct message plus meeting side?
Yeah, so you'd be surprised. It's actually not a huge time commitment. Now, I always tell people 15, 20 minutes a day, because you can automate the initial piece. So when we work with people, we set up, because the biggest thing with all this stuff is the setup. That's what keeps people back, right? I think like to try and figure this out on your own, between the automation, the technology, what to say, what the strategy is, who you should be targeting, it can be quite confusing. It can take a lot of time. I'd say, most of the time it would take people six months plus just to really get this dialed in. Plus, people have other things to do as well, right? So we actually streamline it. We set it up for people. We give them a strategy, give them a roadmap kind of based on where they're at, where they're going. And specifically on the direct messaging piece, listen, like with some place like LinkedIn and Facebook and some other social media to some extent, you can have an outbound campaign going that's going out to hyper targeted people, right? Who are your avatar, right? Who, would resonate with you. And all that campaign's designed to do, it's not designed to sell them any deals. It's not designed to get them to, want to wire you money right away. It's designed to get a little bit of curiosity and have them book an intro call with you. That's it. It's all. So we keep it simple, right? With the outbound campaign. Cool thing is, if they don't respond right away, the follow-up happens automatically, right? So it's through AI. And sure, some people may not be interested or, not want to talk, and that's cool. But a lot of people do, right? Because it's very non-threatening. I think a big part of great marketing and sales is lowering resistance, making it easy for people, right? If they feel like, oh, I don't know this person, they're going to go pitch me on an investment. I don't know. But like, okay, I want to build a relationship. I'm curious. I've always thought a little bit about real estate. Curious what this person has to offer. We have a couple things in common. Shoot, I'll spend 10, 15 minutes on the phone, see what they're about, share what I've got going on too. And that's where the relationship starts, right? And then so it's being able to book meetings in that way and have a systematic process. The old school way of doing it, right? Like 1960s, 1970s, you'd have an outbound team, right? And people would reach out and like cold call. Well, this is a much more modern, sophisticated way of doing that, right? Because the targeting is extremely precise. And these messages are simply hooks. They're hooks. They give people the opportunity to invest some attention and book a meeting, right? So you don't need an appointment setting team. You have the automation. If people have specific questions or there's a little bit of back and forth in conversation, you can either take care of that yourself or have like a virtual assistant admin do it, but you're going to see a lot of the same scenarios playing out. So the big takeaway from that is, with social media, we want to extract those relationships beyond social media as quickly as it makes sense to, right? Because if you talk to someone on the phone, if you and I have a 15-minute call, I can convey a lot more and learn a lot more about you than if we have a long dialogue back and forth in Messenger, right? You can see me, you can hear my tone of voice, I can ask you questions, you can ask me questions, we can build rapport. And then at that 10, 15-minute mark, if it makes sense to go deeper, we can schedule a follow-up call, right? And on that follow-up call, we can get into, okay, what would things look like for you? What if some of our past opportunities looked like, right? And then from there, now you have the honor and the privilege, and we built the relationship, right? Now you have the honor and the privilege when I do have opportunities, you're going to be in the loop, right? So
Mhm.
that's the ideal process. Plus, getting that webinar integrated so someone's educated, right? And you're going to have a stickier relationship, right? Where, there's been a little bit of time, there's been multiple touch points, right? And we've got to be in it for the long game. So that top of funnel, back to your original question, having that, inbound strategy and that outbound strategy is key, because you can intentionally go out and book meetings every single week with high net worth individuals and start getting to know them. So they start getting to know, like, and trust you, and you get to kind of relieve that pressure as well.
It's interesting. It's kind of a modern take on the old school, you know what I mean? Where it's like, and you're knocking down some of those objections that just make the whole thing uncomfortable. I
Mhm.
think that's your point. Whereas like if somebody, it's permission-based marketing. I've heard before. So it's like, if somebody opts in and elects to like watch your webinar, and
Mhm.
then they also want to, and then maybe they don't schedule a call, and then they fall into like an active campaign or something
Sure.
similar with automated nurturing sequence. And as long as it's done well and it's not such a high volume that the people unsubscribe, well, then, I mean, I've unsubscribed. I actually unsubscribed from grants a couple of weeks ago. I just couldn't take it. But anyways, we'll leave him alone for now. But if you go through that, a couple of weeks go by and you're like, you know what, I am going to book a call. Plus, people's life situations are changing all
Mhm.
the time. I think that's easy to underestimate. I mean, um, think about when you do, whether it's buying a car, a home, you want to make an investment. For the average person, like for me, it's a little, not buying homes and cars, but buying real estate is not uncommon. We just closed on 170 industrial acres a month ago, but for most people, it's infrequent and they don't wire money all the time. So like, I think you just, the omnipresent type thing and just being just this open, warm, easy source for someone to come to, invest, feel comforted and shielded and protected. And you just don't know when that moment in their life's going to be. So to your point, having a non-threatening webinar, it's really just information, a call. You've been able to work through whatever your kind of onboarding worksheet is to get to know the person. What have they invested in the past? Have they ever bought and sold real estate? Have they only been in the stock market? Are they heavy into crypto? What are they into? Have they never invested at all? It's all in the backyard or under the mattress. So like just kind of getting a little, how old are they? What are their goals? Do they need cash flow? Do they just want to grow? So, I mean, I had a bunch of these conversations, like I said, leading up to that closing a month ago. And I knew, just as an example, I needed people that did not need an immediate cash flow, but they wanted to have 2.5. We were about a 2.5 multiple on a 5-year or less hold. So that was our deal. And so, but there likely weren't going to be distributions because it's a land carve out deal.
Mhm.
So, but that's a little niche, right? So it's like some investors, that's a growth play, is what a lot of people call it. So your money, it goes out and it grows and it comes back more. And ideally, it's going to be more than 2 times when it went out. However, if I'm talking to somebody who maybe they're net income qualified, not, and so like, I'm sorry, net worth, not income qualified. So they have that $1 million net worth or more without their primary residence. Well, maybe they're old in age, they're about to retire. Maybe they already are retired. They cannot move $50,000 or $100,000 or more into my deal and not get a monthly or quarterly distribution, even if the money's going to come back in 5 years or less, doubled, because they need the cash flow. So to your point, you're not going to know that from podcasting and Instagram and mass media. You have to kind of funnel people down, get on a call with them, and get to know the investors on this list.
Yeah, I mean, that's where building the relationship comes in. You're absolutely right. Different people, different timing too. Like, we had a customer, he was telling me he had a guy he had reached out to, I think in October, November. The guy just came back a couple weeks ago and was like, "Oh, let's talk now." "Oh, well, what happened?" "Hey, he just sold his company. He's got 500K in cash. He's looking to deploy it." Right. And now the timing's right. So you just never know. That's why this is such a long game too. That's why I think if people are like, "Oh, I have this deal I need to raise right now," and like they start burning the bridges, it's a big mistake, right? You've got the long-term system is what yields to those big raises.
I agree. I think that I'm changing. So I've been in real estate 17 years. I've been investing a little over 7. And I was always deal first because I was in the brokerage and appraisal world first. And I'm like, well, nothing matters without a deal. And that actually is true. Nothing matters without a deal. However, we said this earlier, but we can unpack a little bit. I can have like the deal of the century, But if nobody knows me as an investor or someone who takes people's money, private equity, syndicator, puts it out and brings it back, gives it back to you with growth. No one knows me in that role, that manager of money, that investor. Good luck. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how, within reason, it doesn't matter how good the deal is because they don't know, like, and trust you yet. And I think that the audience is probably I don't know for sure, but it's an entrepreneurial audience for this show. And I think it's a little more real estate heavy than just wild entrepreneurial, but I could be wrong. We need to do a little more analytics. But my point with all that is I feel like your average real estate person just thinks the minute I have a deal, the money will come. And I think it's fair to say that's not necessarily true. And especially if you're trying to do a deal, we're recording early summer, late spring 2023. As of right now, as of the time of this recording, I would say the world is puckered up and scared for the most part. National media is frightening. There's just a lot of people that are, whether it's international concerns, political, election, interest rates, and then it varies within asset classes. But, if you go to raise money right now, even for a great deal, people are they're just going to be generally scared right now for most people. So one of the best ways to overcome that is to have that know, like, and trust plus a track record. They can't just kind of know, like, and trust you because you have a good show, but they really want to, okay, we know Ian, we know Yakov, they have podcasts. We've heard them for years, but we also want to know the deals they've done. We want to maybe talk to some other investors as like referrals. And we want to, stick my toe in before I just jump all the way in. And I think that's fair. I think with the technology we have today, databases, nurturing campaigns, the exposure, the ease of communication today, I think that's fair. I wouldn't, even if it's a friend, I probably wouldn't just like jump into some deal. Some guy's pulling on my shirt sleeve and he's like, hey, Brown, I need 200K for this deal. And it's, especially if it's urgent. I mean, let's be honest, nowadays, like if somebody calls you with urgency and they want money, it almost doesn't matter what it is. It's like, whoa, back off. It just feels like a scam. So to your point, like a constant kind of long play nurturing campaign to grow your investor base, through media, and of course, one-on-one phone calls as well. That really is the way. And I do believe that more than ever, just kind of based on what I've been through recently.
Yeah, I mean, those are all key things. That long game, understanding people's climate. And I mean, you mentioned it's people, you can have the best deal in the world, literally. And you know what? If people don't have that trust, they'll say it's too good to be true. Like, this guy's a scammer. It's too good to be true. Deals like that don't come around. This is fishy, right? But if you have that trust, again, now they're already bought in. Now they're ready to rock on the deal, right? So it's when you are raising, yes, being able to create that sense of urgency, but already having the relationship in place, having that trust factor, and it is so much more about the trust and where the other person's at on their investing journey than about the specific deal that you have, right? Because at the end of the day, they don't care about your deal; they care about themselves.
So bringing it back a little more like personal to you, are you primarily focused on the education side, kind of coaching people to become better private money raisers? Are you also trying to build your own portfolio, or is it more focused on the development of others and, digital media and systems?
Both. So at this time, it's both. We're scaling, what we're doing on the coaching consulting side, and it's kind of like a done with you marketing company. That's the best way to look at it. And I'm also interested in taking advisory roles with certain companies, and also building out my stuff. Figuring out ways to get more GP stakes as well. So I'm looking at some things, all while being focused, right? Playing in the same space. I think the biggest challenge we solve, and I think part of my unique ability in this space, is understanding right now there's a huge communication gap between capital raisers and passive investors, especially passive investors who are greener. Huge communication gap. Most people out there, they have money to invest. There's like 4 trillion sitting in retirement accounts right now, but guess what? They don't know what a syndication is. They think they have to live or die by the stock market. So there's a huge communication gap. I think the best capital raisers are the best marketers. best salespeople, right? So it's that skill set. And so our focus is, bridging that gap in those ways that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to jump into a little bit of the Coach Brown closing questions and resources. You ready? It's not a full rifle round, but yeah, I'll just say it slightly faster. All right, number one, what's the most impactful real estate or business book that you've read recently?
Oh man, I'm gonna say it's more of a personal development book. Is that okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's called Levels of Energy. It's a little bit of esoteric. It's by Fred Dodson. Very good book. It makes the world make sense in a lot of ways.
I have not heard of that one. Can you give us just like your quick synopsis? What'd you take away from that?
Basically, it talks about different emotions and the way we process different things, and it puts it on a scale. And so it allows you to see, basically to quantify things in your day to day and make different decisions. And also it allows you to trust your gut a little bit more in decision making because it is that kind of number scale. So it's a fascinating book. It's like 700 pages. But if people are inspired, it's a really great one to kind of dive into.
Excellent. 700 pages. Well, I'll have to do Audible for that one and turn it up to maybe 2.0. See how it goes.
Yeah, no, Audibles are really good for that too.
Yeah. All right. When you're not smashing these goals and, getting everybody better at raising capital and building funnels and getting their one-on-one and outbound, what are you doing for fun?
I live here in Arizona. I like good food, I like hiking, learning, enjoying myself, and getting into comedy more recently too. So it's a kind of an intriguing thing.
Getting into comedy. I haven't heard that. Okay. So are you taking the mic?
Not as of now. Maybe sometime soon. But there's books on how to like write funny, right? And like there's books on how to structure it. So I look at structuring a marketing message. You can structure a stand-up presentation. So maybe I'll take the mic. Depends on how inspired I am.
Very cool. I wish you the best of that. It's funny because this show's not like a laugh a minute, it's pretty much meat and potatoes, entrepreneurial focused podcast. Yeah. But people routinely tell me once I stop recording, they're like, you like to have a little more fun on this show than some of the shows I go on. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that's something, I'm not sure. I think your episode 41, I said it earlier, whatever I said is true. But I think one thing you can see going forward with this show is like, I'm gonna just keep having a little more fun with it. You know what I mean? I think that to your point about you're about to maybe grab the mic and do stand up, good for you. But I mean, kind of push the limits, don't be vanilla. You'll know the people that really like your show when you start wiling out a little bit and they don't unfollow you.
Yeah, it's real. Like it stands out. Again, niching, right? If people get offended because you're not like super stuffy, it's not for them. It's cool.
Niche slap yourself.
That's right. That's the theme of the show. Getting niche slapped.
Getting niche slapped. All right. Sammy, the producer's listening. Maybe she'll pick that as a title. We'll have to wait and see. All right. What is your best yield coach advice for this eager entrepreneurial audience?
Well, isn't it always take action, right? Take action, make a plan, think about this stuff strategically, and really take it one step at a time. You don't have to have a million different channels for finding investors in a capital raising machine overnight. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity to put these systems in place, start building relationships. And I think over the next 12, 18 months, there's gonna be some great deals out there.
Awesome. Where can we find and learn more about Yakov Smart and your platforms?
Well, I'm certainly on LinkedIn, pretty easy to find there. And then for people that want to go a little bit deeper on some of this stuff and actually see kind of how it works on the LinkedIn side, our website is findmoreinvestors.com, and they can go to findmoreinvestors.com/webinar. We've got trainings that we do pretty much on a weekly basis that kind of give people a little bit of a deep dive on using some of this stuff to find more investors.
Congratulations. That's a badass URL. I'm
Appreciate
jealous.
that.
I'm jealous you snagged that one. That's a good one. All right, guys, that's our show for today. It's been a blast chatting with Yakov Smart today. We're lucky to have him on. Thank you for your time. As always, please follow, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with a friend. It makes a huge difference for us and allows us to bring you better and better content. If you're into the socials, we are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and as I confessed, poorly on TikTok. We do put fun updates and little crazy moments on there. So if you want to laugh, or we'll try to make you laugh, jump on there and check it out. All right, guys, but that's the show. I'm your coach, Ian Brown, signing off and reminding everyone to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.